We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, walking up to freedom way. Ain't gonna let injustice turn me around, turn me around. Turn me around, ain't gonna let injustice turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom day. Ain't gonna let discrimination turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let discrimination turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom day. Ain't gonna let no hatred turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let no hatred turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom day. Ain't gonna let oppression turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let oppression turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let no more turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Turn me around, I'm gonna keep on talking, marching up. Turn me around, gonna let me tolerate. Turn me around, I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking,
morning. Welcome. Good morning. Welcome to the Community Church of Chapel Hill, Unitarian Universalist. I am Eric Conrad, a member of the Worship Associates Ministry of our church. Whoever you are, whomever you love, however you arrived at this beloved place, you are welcome here. I especially want to welcome our guests and newcomers. If you're a visitor this morning, there is a special note for you entitled Welcome Guests and Newcomers, and it's on the back of the order of service. As we continue with reopening the church, I want to mention a few things to keep in mind. We are masking inside on Sunday mornings as a way of striving to be an inclusive community. After the service, we invite you to gather in two different areas. The courtyard is a masked optional space for fellowship, and the area behind the Jones Building, which includes the porch, the grassy area, and playground, is a space where masking is mandatory. We are not currently passing the offering baskets, so if you want to make a donation, you can place your donation in the offering baskets as you enter or exit the sanctuary. Our opening hymn this morning is number 188. Here. 188, Come, Come, Whoever You Are. Words by Rumi.
We'll do this as a two-part round. People on the left will follow Mary, and the people on the right will follow Claire. And we'll do it a couple times together and then branch off into two parts.
The words for the call to worship this morning are from the Reverend A. Powell Davies, who was minister of All Souls Church Unitarian in Washington, D.C. from 1944 until his death in 1957. None of our private worlds is big enough for us to live a wholesome life in. We need the wider world of joy and wonder, of purpose and venture, of toil and tears. What are we, any of us, but strangers and sojourners, forlornly wandering through the nighttime until we draw together and find the meaning of our lives in one another, dissolving our fears in each other's courage, making our music together, and lighting torches to guide us through the dark. We belong together. Love is what we need to love and be loved. Let our hearts be open, and what we would receive from others, let us give. For what is given still remains to bless the giver when the gift is love. The words for the chalice lighting are in your order of service. If you wish to do so, please join with me in reading them. My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I have to cast my lot with those who, age after age, perversely, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world. We have a musical presentation.
This morning, we have a special part of the service. We are honoring a transition in our community because later this week, Barbara Rogbell will be moving from Chapel Hill to live close to family in Maryland, and will enjoy a whole week at the beach with family in between that move. And so I wanted to take a moment to notice this transition that is joyful for Barbara and sad for us. Barbara joined our church May 23rd, 1999. I looked it up in the membership book. That was the same time of the year same year that Brad Kasiba and Dorothy Hammett joined, and Kari Andrade joined. And Kari Andrade, who wasn't able to be here this morning, sent words of tribute about her friendship with Barbara. And so I'm going to read Kari's words. Kari writes, "I first met Barbara in Building Your Own Theology, taught by Charlie Cast. Barbara's life story is fascinating. A childhood in Germany and the Netherlands. She was friends with Anne Frank's family, especially Margot, Anne's older sister. Barbara joined the Dutch resistance as a teenager and was Audrey Hepburn's big sister in the Amsterdam Ballet Company. She was one of the first people to see Anne Frank's diary before it was published. She rode elephants in the circus in the United States, married a future Nobel Prize winner, was a professional photographer while raising 4 children, and was featured in Life magazine." It sounds too fantastic to be real, but none of this, Kari writes, is why I love Barbara and will miss her terribly. Kari writes, "What I love about Barbara is that despite our age difference, she always meets me where I am and has been a true and great friend for 20 years. We've talked about everything under the sun, as friends do. And she is always wise and kind and makes me see things from a new and more generous perspective. Over the past 20 years, we have also shared many holidays, and she has become like family. I know her moving is the right thing, but it breaks my heart. So this is not goodbye. It is until we meet again. I'm already planning a trip to visit after she is settled." And so as we honor Barbara for her 22 years of membership in this community, I invite Barbara, would you please stand up just so we can recognize you? And Barbara's friends said that your favorite poem is The Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. And so as a farewell present to you, we're going to read Mary Oliver's Wild Geese. "You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only need to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese high in the clean blue air are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. Barbara, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us, and we wish you only the best in your next journey.
Thank you. Oh, beautiful, what heroes through in liberated strife, whom mothers said our country love, and mercy more than America, America, may God thy glory find, till all success be nobleness and regain divine. Oh, beautiful, oh, spacious skies, oh, and the waves of grain, oh, purple mountains, majesties, above the fruited from sea to shining sea. God shed His grace on thee, and around thy good brotherhood, from sea to shining sea, from sea to shining sea.
Each week, we hold in our service a time for sharing the joys and the sorrows that we bring with us to this church community. This is a time of trust where if you've come with either a significant personal joy or a significant personal sorrow, you're invited to come forward, to place a stone in the water bowl, to say your name, and in a sentence or two, to speak your joy or your sorrow. People will generally come down the sides and then will kind of return up the middle. So are there any joys and sorrows this morning?
My name is Sue Brewer. My joy is 20 years of friendship with Barbara, created or nurtured by the church. I met her in November 1999 in a small women's group that the church started called Women to Women. Our group met every month for 15 years, much longer. She represented the IFC by taking donated each month to the pantry, and she was the one who brought the holiday meals celebrating Thanksgiving for turkey dinners at the IFC to this church. Friendship that will affect me the rest of my life.
My name is Bianca Rodriguez. Good morning. I dropped 2 stones in remembrance of my grandfather who passed away. He lived a really long life. He was 90. And in remembrance of my friend from school, Kayvon, who committed suicide. He was not too much older than I am. So if you could just keep their family in your prayers, I'd appreciate that.
Good morning. My name is Julie Tucker. I don't see as many familiar faces. I used to come here for years, and I love the tribute to Barbara. And ironically, I'm visiting from Maryland, and my daughter Ella, who grew up here from age 3 through 8. I wish she was here, but she's visiting with her godfather in Carrboro right now. And I just got very moved to tears at the very first musical presentation. I can only tell you what genius we all have in this church with Glenn. The music, and I used to come here fairly regularly. I was usually moved and wanted to come because of the music, the people, but the music was amazing, and your singing was phenomenal. The talent here, the musical talent's really great. Anyway, just really happy to be here, and I'm happy that I get to meet someone who's moving to Maryland, and it's a great place. And that's it. It's a joy I want to share. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Jenna. I dropped 2 stones today. One is a great joy. 3.5 months ago, my mom was very, 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 very ill, and we didn't know what it was, and I was afraid that she was going to die somewhat imminently, and flew up there. She subsequently was diagnosed with ovarian cancer stage 4, and the joy is that she's responding to chemo, she's strong, she's home, she's walking on her own with her crutches, and she meets with the surgeon this week to see if she's a good candidate. And my kids and I were able to go the week before last up to celebrate her 80th birthday. So the second one is both a joy and a concern as a teacher and a parent of a high school senior. Tomorrow we go back to school, and I'm joyful that my room is going to be full of eager to learn 13-year-olds. And I'm also afraid that my room is going to be full with eager to learn 13-year-olds.
am Jillian. I've got a stone of concern for my 2-year-old neighbor, Casey, who attended a birthday party yesterday that I hosted for another neighbor and took a bite of birthday cake and went into full anaphylaxis. It was very scary. He's okay. He seems to keep developing new severe allergies. We were so careful not to have any peanut, and it seems he now has an egg allergy as well, and his parents are very worried about his future safety. So if you can just hold his family in your heart. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Becky Wilkes, and this is Chris Wilkes. And we were happy to celebrate our 35th wedding anniversary last weekend. And we were able to celebrate with my sister and her husband, who's known Chris since high school. And it was their 30th anniversary, so it was a fun weekend and a chance to celebrate.
I place 2 stones, 1 stone for the people of Haiti, and the second stone for the people of Afghanistan, as well as a final stone for all of the joys and sorrows that were not spoken this morning. Would you join with me in the spirit of meditation? Spirit of life, source of our being and our becoming. We hold in our hearts the transitions in this community. We hold the mixture of joy and sorrow as we say goodbye to dear friends. We hold both excitement and anxiety as we say hello to a new school year. We hold love, care, and concern as we hold those in our community who struggle with illness, who face hardship, who experience challenges in their living. We hold in empathy and in deep care all who live with loss. We ask in this time for the vision not to look away from the pain of the world. And so we hold the fragility, the pain, and the hope of life in our hearts and in our living. Amidst these prayers and the prayers of our own hearts, let us hold a few moments of silent meditation. Amen. And blessed be. We're going to sing hymn number 1023. It's entitled Building Bridges.
We'll do the same thing we attempted to do with the last one, which is sing one time together and then split up into two parts for 2 or 3 times.
I want to begin with a provocative, challenging, controversial, and depressing statement. There has never been a truly democratic election in the history of the United States. Let me say that again. There has never been a truly democratic election in the history of the United States. How can I possibly say that? Well, think of every election that was held before August 18th, 1920. Who can tell me what happened on August 18th, 1920? Yes. That's right. That was the date when the 19th Amendment to the Constitution was ratified. The 19th Amendment, of course, gave women, or more precisely gave white women, the right to vote. So every election before August 18th, 1920, the elections that gave us Washington and Lincoln, and the elections that gave us Andrew Jackson and Woodrow Wilson, was an election that denied the ballot to more than half the population. None of those elections can truly be called democratic. But what about the next period in US history? For the next 45 years, lasting until August 6th, 1965. Can anyone tell me what happened on August 6th, 1965? Voting Rights Act. That's right, that was the date when the Voting Rights Act was signed into law. The Voting Rights Act said that states with a history of disenfranchising African American voters had to change the way they conducted elections so as to no longer disenfranchise African American voters. White women got the vote in 1920, but for the next 45 years, African-American men and women in a large region of the United States were deprived of the right to vote. The elections in that period gave us Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Herbert Hoover, but I have a hard time saying that any of them were truly democratic. But Tom, you might be saying, what about the last 56 years? We had the 19th Amendment and the Voting Rights Act. Surely those elections were all democratic, right? Well, not exactly. I think the last half century can be described as a struggle for democracy in which anti-democratic forces have often proven remarkably successful at weakening or thwarting true democracy. Let me define democracy. Democracy simply means the power to govern rests in the hands of the people, and the will of the majority is followed. Or democracy is when people have the power to decide their own future. And I would go further and say that in true democracies, 3 additional things are true. First, in true democracies, the rights of the minority are protected. Second, in true democracies, people have a sense of their own power and engage in the work of democracy. True democracies are passionate and participatory. And third, in true democracies, the power of people is equitably distributed. Those 3 things seem to me to be the hallmarks of a true democracy. There are 3 major ways in which anti-democratic forces actively degrade democracy, which is by trampling the rights of the minority, by causing people to lose a sense of their own power, and by unequal distribution of power in voting. Voter suppression is the leading anti-democratic way to trample the rights of the minority. Voter suppression describes any attempt to make it more difficult, more onerous, or flat out impossible to vote. And I don't need to tell you that there is currently a tidal wave of voter suppression legislation sweeping the country right now. This legislation is designed to make it harder for certain populations, African Americans, Latinas, poor people, and young people to cast a ballot. The legislation makes it harder to register to vote, closes polling locations, limits early voting, and more. It sets up hoops and hurdles and barriers to voting, an attempt to suppress the vote. Another anti-democratic strategy is to cause people to feel a lack of their own power. And the presence of big money in politics also functions anti-democratically. Let me tell you a story by way of analogy. Back when I was a brand new minister, I was traveling to different churches applying for my first ministry job. And in those travels, I was interviewing with search committees. So imagine this, on one such trip, I am in a living room being interviewed by a 7-member search committee. And the oddest thing keeps happening during this interview. They ask me a question, I answer, and then 6 of the members turn to the 7th to look to see what he thinks. The member of the church they were all looking at was not only the biggest donor to the church, but he gave as much as every other member of the church put together. His opinions, ideas, and preferences counted more than anyone else's. On paper, I guess you could call that search committee or that church a democracy, but in practice, it really wasn't. And here's the thing, if you look at that history, I didn't take that church. That was enough to make me say, no way. The congregation has struggled. It has had high ministerial turnover, low levels of participation, and difficulty upon difficulty recruiting leaders. And I think it's because fundamentally people there have the sense that they do not really have a say. That loss of the feeling of their own power diminishes their engagement. When unlimited big money enters politics, it has the same effect. It works as a depressive to true democracy. And a third anti-democratic force that is very much alive are the anti-democratic features baked into our political process that results in voters holding inequitable power. The Electoral College is fundamentally anti-democratic because it does not give power to the majority. The institution of the Senate is anti-democratic because it makes the power of individual voters inequitable. The filibuster is anti-democratic, and gerrymandering, as we know so well and so painfully here in North Carolina, is anti-democratic. These systems thwart majority rule by producing a power inequity among voters. Here's the thing, we know it not only by looking at the systems, but we know it by the results. A way to measure whether our system is truly democratic is to look at whether policies that are supported by a vast majority of Americans are actually enacted. I know much has been made out of polarization in our culture, and that's real, but there are in fact many areas where a substantial majority of Americans just simply agree. 2/3 of Americans favor significant legislation, major legislation to address climate change. It's 2 to 1. That's 200 million to 100 million. 2/3 of Americans favor increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour. It's 200 million to 100 million. 90%, 270 million to 30 million favor basic gun control legislation. And 90% of Americans favor significant campaign finance reforms in order to influence the impact of big money in politics. And so we might ask ourselves, why is it that immensely popular legislation, why does this languish? Why isn't everyone rushing to pass this? And the answer is because true democracy has grown increasingly decayed within our governing institutions. Each year for the past decade, the Unitarian Universalist Association chooses a common read book, invites all Unitarian Universalists to read it. Back in 2017, the book they chose was Daring Democracy. The authors, Francis Moore Lappé and Adam Eichen, were activists nearly 50 years apart in age who share a deep and abiding passion for the democratic spirit. And listen to their words. Humans thrive best, they write, when the communities we create enable each of us to experience a sense of our own power, a sense that our lives have meaning beyond our own survival, and that we have a satisfying connection with one another. Add those three together, what do you have? The essence of democracy. And I would add that it's those things, power and meaning and community, that are the things that are also fundamental to our own religious tradition. Our church is a place where people can find the power to do things, create things, lead. Our church is a place of meaning where people can find deep meaning in their living. And our church is a place of community and connection. I believe that we are in a moment of both immense danger and immense possibility in terms of the health of our democracy. This is a moment, these months, these years coming up. These is a time that is as critical to democracy as 1920, as critical to democracy as 1965. Our parent denomination, the Unitarian Universalist Association, has made voting rights central to its public witness and social justice work over the last several years. Last year, UU The Vote organized Unitarian Universalists throughout the country to activate and encourage voters. At this year's General Assembly, the keynote speakers were Stacey Abrams and Desmond Meade, an organizer whose focus is on restoring voting rights to felons. Our own church was among the most active in the whole state in UU The Vote efforts in 2020. We pledged enough hours in postcard writing and phone banking that Marion dyed her hair purple. And I know many members of our church have been and continue to be deeply active in voter registration, voter education, and voter turnout activities and organizing, whether as part of a political party or in partnership with organizations like the NAACP or the UU Justice Ministry of North Carolina. And still others in our congregation have even run for public office. Humans thrive best when the communities we create enable each of us to experience a sense of power, a sense that our lives have meaning, and a satisfying connection with others. So may it always be in our church. So may it always be in our democracy. Our closing hymn this morning is number 298, Wake Now, My Senses. And I invite you to rise in spirit, or in body, or both. Won't you please join with me in the words by which we extinguish the chalice, saying together, we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of unity, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And as we do, I invite you, if you are a person who does not wish to hold hands, I invite you to put your hands over your heart. If you're a person who wants to hold hands, you can put your hands down, and if your neighbor takes it, that's great. And let us sing together our closing song, Shalom. Thank you very, very